The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everybody, welcome to our coal ash rate hike webinar. We're going to have two presenters today, Katie Hicks from Clean Water for North Carolina and Gillian Riley from Sierra Club. This is Amy Adams from Appalachian Voices. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. Hopefully we will be able to answer all of your questions. If you have any questions, please feel free to either type them in the chat button, or we will be holding a Q&A session at the end if you want to hold your questions till then. If you have questions that need longer follow-up, please feel free to email any of the staff members that are helping put on this webinar. You can email Katie, Jillian Riley, Amy Adams, and Luis Rodriguez. Any of us will be able to answer your questions if you have follow-ups. So with no further ado, I'm going to pass the controls over to Katie Hicks, Clean Water for North Carolina Associate Director, and she's going to be talking to us about what to expect at a rate hike hearing. Katie?
Thanks, Amy. Hi, everyone. Thanks for making the time to attend this. We hope it will be useful. I was going to talk a little bit about what to expect if maybe you haven't been to one of these Utilities Commission hearings before. Maybe you've been to other types of public hearings. They're a little different, and I always find it helps me to be more confident going into one of these situations, kind of knowing what is coming. Next slide. So I wanted to kind of introduce you to the NC Utilities Commission. If you're not familiar with the agency, they regulate for-profit utilities throughout North Carolina. So that includes electric utilities like Duke, but also natural gas, water and wastewater utilities that are privately owned, and also the transportation and telecommunications sections. Fun fact, it's actually the oldest regulatory body in state government. The NCUC evolved from the Railroad Commission, which was created in 1891. So this goes back to sort of the initial realization in our country that these monopolies needed to have some regulation. There are 7 commissioners, and if you could go to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about the current commissioners. So who are these folks? Well, basically, these commissioners are appointed by the North Carolina governor, and they serve 6-year terms. And there's 7 of them, as I mentioned. The terms, though, are staggered. So right now, these commissioners are a mix of appointees from the past 3 or 4 different governors. The only new commissioner that was appointed so far by Governor Roy Cooper, who is sitting on the commission, is Dan Clodfelter. Governor Cooper also reappointed Commissioner Brownbland. He also appointed a 3rd person named Charlotte Mitchell, who's an attorney out of the Triangle area. But the Senate has not yet confirmed her, which meant she wasn't able to participate in these Duke Energy Progress and Duke Energy Carolinas proceedings. So, and if you have questions about these individuals later, you're welcome to bring them up. But like I said, they're kind of a mix of appointees who are tasked with regulating rates and service for all of these different types of utilities. All of them may be present at the hearing you attend. I believe the full commission did attend most of the Duke Energy Progress hearings, but sometimes on less, cases that affect less customers, sometimes they'll send like a 3-commissioner panel to different locations throughout the state when they're doing public hearings. So you may see all these folks, or you may see a subset. Okay, next slide. I wanted to let folks know, because you may hear this term if you're not familiar with the public staff. This is essentially a separate agency that is kind of part of the commission, but they're independent. And what they're supposed to do is represent consumers in these commission proceedings. So this is a staff agency that has people who review documents, it has accountants, but relevant to you for testifying at the hearings is they will send lawyers who will be the people calling the public witnesses. So these will be the people signing you up to speak and calling on you to testify and maybe asking you some questions. So that's what the public staff is. And they'll also, later on review all of the customer input and make their recommendations to the Utilities Commission. Then the Utilities Commission has the final say. Okay, next slide. So those are kind of the players. And then in terms of getting ready to attend one of these hearings, the biggest thing is to plan to arrive early. I know some of the events, I believe Charlotte and Greensboro, there are press events or rallies planned, which you may already be thinking of being a part of. If not, you can contact some of us on staff and we'll let you know what the details are on those. So you may want to participate in something like that. Another thing that's really important to think about is that a lot of these hearings are held in a courthouse, and there may be special security you have to go through, kind of like going to a stadium. So you might have to put your belongings through an x-ray machine or something. And one thing I know from several of these events that has surprised people is, you know, try not to bring like a pocket knife or something, because they won't let you bring it in, and you may have to run back to your car or something. We also, with the Duke Energy Progress hearings, we ran into some site-specific rules, like at the Asheville Duke Energy Progress hearing, folks were permitted to go in, but then once they went in, they couldn't come back out. So it's kind of hard to know because it will be based on the venue security more so than the Utilities Commission or Duke Energy, but just to be aware that, you know, again, it's a good reason to get there early and be prepared to be there for a while. And then most importantly, the reason to arrive early if you want to testify is that they do it on a first come, first serve basis for speakers. So the earlier that you can sign up, the earlier you get to speak. And I know a lot of these have gone pretty late into the evening, like 11 o'clock or so. So just be sure if you want to speak, get on the list. And like I mentioned before, it will be the public staff representatives who will have sign-up sheets when you go in, be looking for members of the public who want to make their testimony. Okay, next slide. Just kind of a brainstorm list of what you might want to bring. Obviously, it's helpful to have a written copy of your statement for yourself to read from, unless you're just really great and can remember things, but I know I can't. And it's also helpful to bring some extra copies, either to give to the commissioners if you'd like to also submit a written testimony, or to hand to people who really liked what you had to say and want to learn more. You can also, kind of like an actual, you know, courtroom proceeding, you can submit documents as evidence in the case. And the way to do that is just bring what you want to bring, whether it's your power bill or photos of bottled water on your porch or anything at all. And then just make it clear when you begin to testify that you want to submit it as evidence. Because there may be a lot of like-minded consumers who are angry about the rate hikes, it never hurts to be prepared with handouts and petitions and coal ash buttons and whatever else that you would like to give to other folks that you meet. Oh, and here's this note again about pocket knives, just because I know a lot of people have run into that issue. Okay, I have one more slide, and then I will let us move on to the next speaker. So when the hearing begins, you'll be in this courtroom type space, and the chairman, Ed Finley, if he's there, or else whoever's chairing the hearing, will set some ground rules. He'll probably kind of lecture everybody about being civil and being quiet and that kind of thing. Then they will give Duke Energy Carolina's attorney an opportunity to make a statement, since they're the ones applying for this rate increase. So don't be surprised by that. It's not out of the ordinary, although it may feel like not the best way to start out the hearing. But after that, they should get to public comment pretty quickly. And the public staff attorney who's there will just go down the list and start calling public witnesses. So that's you, you're the witnesses. And this is a pretty official courtroom proceeding, again, so they will ask you to swear or affirm. If you swear in, you know, place your hand on the Bible and you say that you'll tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And then they'll ask you your name and address so that you'll be able to, they have a court reporter typing a transcript of this entire thing, which later you can read online. So he or she has to be able to spell your name and address. And they may ask you, are you a customer of the utility? And then you can make your statement, which Jillian's going to talk about next. I did also just want to mention to folks that the attorneys for the public staff or Duke or other intervening organizations, and even the commissioners, they can ask you clarifying questions at the end of your statement, or sometimes they even interrupt, but hopefully they won't do that. But just be prepared and just know that you can just answer to the best of your ability. It shouldn't be intimidating. If you don't know, you can just say you don't know. So just wanted to let folks know that could happen, but it often doesn't. And okay, that's all that I had to say, and I will give it up to the next speaker.
Hey, this is Amy again. Thank you so much, Katie, for covering that. We do have two quick questions that popped up during your presentation. If we could take just a moment to address those. The first question is, does it do any good to contact the commissioners before the hearing?
Okay, that's a really good question. I know that in terms of what they officially weigh in evidence when they make decisions, the most important form of input is the actual testimony at the hearings. That said, it certainly can't hurt, and their contact information, I believe, is on the Utilities Commission website for the individual commissioners, and you can also write a written comment. But I think if you can be there and if you can speak, that's definitely the best thing to do.
Thanks, Katie. That leads into the next question, which is, do I have to speak or can I just provide written comment?
Yeah, you can definitely provide written comments. You can send them, there's an email address for the commission, and you just have to include the docket number, which somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I believe is E7 sub 1146, but we can send that around in notes later. You can also, I think several organizations have websites where you can kind of submit a comment. So if you feel comfortable doing that, that's great. But if you can attend, and even if you don't want to speak, but you can be a body in the room, that will also be really helpful. So I think all of the above is good.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Katie, for covering that for us. We're going to switch right on over to Gillian Riley with the Sierra Club. Jillian, take it away.
Well, thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Well, now that we are prepared and know what to expect at the hearing, let's talk about what we're going to say. So, how to give a good testimony in 3 minutes or less. Next slide. Next slide, please. Awesome. So today's presentation, I'm going to go over the 6 steps that really make up a successful testimony. So we'll just go down each of the different steps and give examples. And then there is a worksheet that's attached to this webinar that you can print off and work through yourself to develop your own testimony. Next slide. So introduction. So as Katie mentioned, as you get sworn in, you'll just say your name, where you live, and then you want to go ahead and give a couple interesting facts about you. So my name is Jane Doe. I live at 123 Apple Road in Durham, North Carolina, 27701. And I'm a grandmother, I'm on a fixed income, and have been a Duke Energy customer for 30 years. So it's really important to give these qualifiers about who you are and why you're there. Let the commissioners know immediately why you care about this Duke Energy rate hike. Next slide. So now, why are you there, right? What's the problem? What bothers you most about the proposed rate hike? So I cannot afford an electric bill increase. I work very hard to keep my bills down and can barely afford them now. I believe Duke Energy needs to clean up the coal ash, but they need to pay for it themselves and not rely on senior citizens like myself to pay for it. So this ties right in to me being a grandmother, me being on fixed income, and really what the problem is for me personally. Now, this is also a place where you can tie in some of those fast facts. So you can mention an electric bill increase of 16.7%. They need to clean up their coal ash mess, an $8.7 billion, proposed cleanup cost. But you don't have to, right? So it's important to realize that you can tie in some of those facts, but also you can just really speak from the heart about what the problem is and how it really affects you. Next slide. So the urgency. So why does it matter to you so much? Really make it personal. 2 of my grandchildren live with me. I'm their sole caregiver. They rely on me for food, clothes, and school supplies, but I only make $800 a month. If my bill increases, then that means my 2 grandchildren will suffer because I'll have no money for school supplies, and they will be less prepared for the future. Raising my rates doesn't just affect me, but it affects the children of North Carolina. So this, like I said, just brings it back full circle. So it starts out introducing, I'm a grandmother, I'm on fixed income. The problem is, I can't afford that, can't afford electric bill increase, but it's urgent because it doesn't just affect me, it affects every single person in my household. And as a grandmother, it affects my children, right, my grandchildren. And so it really makes it personal. You never know how the different commissioners will relate to what you're saying. Some commissioners will need the personal story. Some commissioners, will want the facts and the data. So it's really just important to talk from the heart and really why you are there and what affects you. Next slide. So the solution. So what is the hopeful vision, right? So everything we've talked about is how negative everything is. So what's that hopeful vision? Well, my hope for the future is that Duke Energy will take responsibility for their actions. They'll clean up their coal ash mess, and they'll be a role model for my grandchildren and the other children in this state, right? So bringing it back again, like what's important here? What's important here is that we want it cleaned up. We want them to really take responsibility. Next slide. So request. So you've done a really great job of laying out who you are, what the problem is, why you're there, why you care. So the request is super simple. It's a very simple ask. I ask you today to please reject the proposed rate hike. You've given them all the reasons why. You've explained your position, who you are as a person. You've made it personal. You've told them that Duke needs to take responsibility, have this hope for this vision of hope. So now it's like the request is, I ask you to please reject the proposed rate hike. Super simple. And lastly, next slide, you thank them, right? So thank you for showing up. Thank you for listening so attentively to my comments. Thank you for acting in the interest of all North Carolinians. And that right there is your 3 minutes. So next slide. So you speak from the heart and you speak from what you know. So if you're a grandmother, you can talk about that. If you're a student, right, you can talk about, student loans. If you're living on bottled water for 3 years, talk about that. Talk about what that means to you. You have to remember that these commissioners are going to be hearing testimonies for hours all across the state. And they know the facts. They've read the case. And so it's really just up to you to share from your heart exactly, what this means to you, how this will affect you as a North Carolinian, as a Duke Energy customer, as someone living on bottled water, as a grandmother, as a student, whatever that is, to really just show them and express to them why it matters that they represent you in the interest of North Carolinians. So there's the 6 steps right there. Like I said, there's a worksheet attached with examples and fill in the blank for you to really write out your testimony and be prepared for the rate hike. That's all I got. Any questions?
Great, Jillian. Thank you so much for covering that. A couple of questions that we had is, what is the average time limit of being able to speak?
So 5 minutes is the time limit, but I say 3 minutes because you could have a question asked of you and you want to be prepared to have a little time to answer any questions. But 5 minutes is going to be the total time that you're allowed to speak.
Okay, thank you. We've heard from some of the other hearings that when they question folks giving testimony, that they may ask about the data or the facts that you said. What do you do to prepare for them asking questions of you?
Yeah, definitely. So if you're going to mention data in your testimony, and on this webinar, we have a fast facts sheet that is attached. And, you can list us, Sierra Club, App Voices, Clean Water from North Carolina. We are resources, and, we're experts in this field. And so you can mention us as resources of where you got the data from. If you got it from the newspaper, you can mention the newspaper. Definitely be prepared if you're going to use any type of data that at least the source of where it came from. But there's only been a couple of people that have been asked to verify their information, and so it's not something that usually comes up. But yeah, definitely, if you're going to mention some data, then just print out this fast facts sheet. So you can hold that up, and like Katie said, bring it with you, have that documentation. You can say, right here, Clean Water for NC and Sierra Club and, ACT put this together. So that's a good way to back up your data.
Great, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for covering all of that for us today. For the attendees on the phone, are there any other questions that you would like for us to cover at this time?
Yeah, so just as a quick review of how many copies we would need, because if we only give our written comment to the scribe, who is the public staff person, would that be as effective as making copies for all the commissioners?
Hey, this is Katie. I could try to answer that. I think you would be fine to just have one copy, unless there's something that you would want the commissioners to look at right then, like a visual or something. We've often told people to bring more copies just in case, but I think just one copy, if that's what you can swing, would be fine.
Okay, that's a great question. Thank you so much for taking that, Katie. Well, that sort of wraps up what we had for you today. If you want to follow up, any of us will be able to answer your questions offline. You can contact Katie Hicks at katie@cwfnc.org. You can contact Gillian Riley at jillian.riley@sierraclub.org. You can contact Luis Rodriguez, who is on the call, but we've not heard from him. He is luis.rodriguez@sierraclub.org. And of course, you can reach out to either Amy or Ridge at AppVoices. That's amy@appvoices.org or ridge@appvoices.org. Any of us will be able to answer your questions. If you're listening to this on recording, we will be sending this around with 2 handouts. If you want to take a look at those handouts, they will also help you as you prepare your testimony for the rate hike hearings. Again, thank you so much. We hope that this was helpful, and have a great rest of your afternoon or evening.